we can get started. So, again, welcome. And this webinar is hosted by the Sorensen Legacy Foundation Center for Clinical Excellence. Before we get started, we want to respectfully acknowledge that Utah State University is a land-grant institution, and our activities throughout the state of Utah take place on tribal ancestral lands. These lands have been carefully stewarded by the Goshute, Navajo, Shoshone, Paiute, Ute, and Mountain Ute tribes. We offer our respect and recognition to their elders past, present, and future. A little introduction to the Sorensen Center. These are the services that are included in our building. And if you're interested in learning about more of them or further details about any of them, then you can call or email me, which is there at the bottom of the slide. I won't go through all of them because there are a lot. And I also want to talk about some webinar decorum. So like I said, this webinar is being recorded. During the presentation, please remain muted unless asked a question or if our presenter encourages you to unmute yourself and to share. You can also send questions in the chat to everyone or privately to me, Dakota Pond. We will have a Q&A during our last 15 minutes. And then a box link of this presentation will be available tomorrow. And so you can either email me or find the link on our social media pages. I want to take a little bit of time to introduce our presenter. So Jessica Barboza has graciously offered to lead this presentation, and I'm really looking forward to hearing her thoughts and learning from her. She is a licensed associate marriage and family therapist in the state of Utah, and she's studying to earn her doctorate in human development and family studies. Some of her research interests center around family meaning making, and she is currently conducting research to better understand how these processes can impact family resilience. She has facilitated grief groups at the Children's Bereavement Center of South Texas, the Austin Center for Grief and Loss, and the Sorensen Center. She also, Jessica, advocates for the scientist practitioner model of clinical training and values interdisciplinary collaboration in research and clinical practice. So we're really excited to have her, and I'm going to go ahead and end my screen share and turn the time over to her.
There we go. Now I'm unmuted. Thank you, Dakota, so much. And it's lovely to see so many familiar names. So glad all of you are here. Let me go ahead and start to share my screen and open this up. Okay, so that was a beautiful introduction, Dakota, but also a little bit more about me. As a marriage and family therapist, I do want to treat today as more of an experiential exercise. This training is not intended for clinicians, but it will certainly have a clinical flair to it. And so I want to offer that for all of you, give you a chance to really reflect on both your own experience, your clients' experiences, maybe family experiences, what's going on in your life currently. And hopefully through all of that, we will learn how to make meaning together, to share meaning with each other. And what really does that look like? What is meaning, and how do we collectively make meaning together? So that's the intended goal of today. But first, maybe think briefly to yourself. What drew you to today and to today's topic? And why is it particularly challenging to cope with grief during COVID-19? And again, think this to yourself. You don't need to answer it. It's more of a rhetorical question, but maybe just to get ourselves centered and thoughtful. Consider those two questions. What brought you to today? And what is particularly challenging about coping with grief in COVID-19? So for myself, I think what drew me to this topic was first, I have a strong interest in grief and meaning making, but I also think coping in COVID-19 presents so many interesting challenges, and trying to understand how we make meaning when we feel sometimes so distant from one another. What does that look like? How do we overcome some of those challenges that might be presented because we are more distant than we usually are or have ever been? And so I think that that presents some unique challenges to coping with grief in COVID-19. I also think so much of the grief due to COVID-19 is ambiguous loss. Um, and so it's challenging, or I think many people are struggling with figuring out what really they're grieving. And if we don't know what we're grieving, it's hard to make sense of it. It's hard to make meaning out of it. And so I think that that presents another challenge too. And I also think, because of COVID, that we have lost a lot of our rituals and traditions, which is a big source of meaning making for many people, for most of us, if not all of us. And so a lot of our traditions and rituals that we would normally do, such as funerals or even participating in, I don't know, regular group activities, is very different. So first, I want to just briefly share what is grief, at least from my perspective. I think grief is a complex emotional process. I do believe that grief is fully rooted in our emotional processing. That is a process of reorganizing oneself after a loss. And a loss can be defined most typically as a death loss, but it can be any other kind of loss. Again, some ambiguous losses of COVID-19 are just a loss of convenience, a loss of a sense of connection, a loss of our daily routine. And so many ambiguous losses can be a part of that too. But it is a complex emotional process. And the process really involves an understanding of meaning making, which we're going to go into a lot of detail about today. The second part is reestablishing relational bonds. Sometimes, if it is a death loss, it's reestablishing those relational bonds with the person who's died, figuring out how to continue that bond that can transcend time and distance and proximity, geographical location. And so how do we do that, especially in COVID-19, reestablishing some relational bonds, even if there's not a death loss? And then developing new rituals and traditions that might replace old rituals and traditions that were a source of meaning for us. So this is an open-ended question. Feel free to answer this, whether in the chat or you can unmute yourself. But maybe consider, what are some rituals that have helped you over this last year?
So we could participate?
Yes, Ophelia, go ahead.
Okay.
Please participate.
All right. So I'm Catholic, and before COVID, I would go to Mass every day. And so now the churches are open, but I'm still doing it like virtually. I do Mass every day, and so and I'm keeping my same schedule as usual. That's been very helpful. I'm working from home. I'm a licensed marriage family therapist, and I'm working from home. And so I'm just trying to keep it as normal as possible, like getting up at the same time early in the morning, doing my prayer, going to sleep. My day ends at 10 p.m. No, nothing, no TV, no social media, no nothing. Day is over, start shutting down, go to sleep. I think that's been very helpful for me. Trying to keep it that way.
Yeah, keep some of that tradition
from the past right now.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you. I think so many of our traditions and rituals are rooted in our spiritual life and faith lives as well. So so absolutely, sometimes that can revolve around that. One ritual that you reminded me of too is, like, my husband and I is because we are currently like living in different areas right now. We have started to watch movies together via FaceTime, which is a really interesting ritual that we're trying to embark on. But that has really helped relieve some of the significant feelings of, I don't know, losing that connection in our relationship to try to find time to watch movies together, even if it's over FaceTime. So thank you for sharing. Any other rituals?
I think for my family, I have a young family with 4 children, and I've noticed that we do really well in making sure that we're doing our daily routines just as we did before COVID. But I've also noticed that mealtime has become a really special time, and we work really hard to make sure that we're setting the table and we're sitting down and we're having that reconnection with each other at the end of the day daily. And also we still are doing our Friday night movie time together, and it's been really wonderful to be able to have that time together to connect and to keep some of these rituals alive.
Thank you, Moana. Yeah, I love that.
We have a couple comments in the chat. One person mentioned, having like that morning routine of prayer and reading the Bible, kind of like Ophelia mentioned. And then another similar of getting dressed for work, even though they're working online, and even making sure that they're putting on shoes that like match their outfit. They're really trying to maintain that sense of routine, it sounds like. And I would just add in that my morning ritual of doing yoga has been really helpful. And that's something that I've been able to maintain, even though for a long period of time I haven't been able to attend like a in-studio class. Being able to do it at home has still been really valuable to me.
Wonderful. Yeah. And I think some of these rituals we've had to reinvent, right? Like when churches closed down or when we weren't able to go to yoga classes or whatever that looked like for us, we had to reinvent what that means, and how meaningful it is now to just put shoes on in the day, and how meaningful of a ritual that can be for us to feel like we're still preparing for our day. So again, rituals help us create meaning, and new rituals become meaningful in times of loss. Thank you all for sharing. So we're going to talk a little bit about meaning and what that looks like and how do we make it. So meaning gives purpose to our internal experience. It helps to interpret our internal feelings and sensations. And so oftentimes language helps us to interpret what's going on subjectively for us. It's feelings and things aren't necessarily rooted in language. They're rooted in sensations and body interpretations. And so meaning is our way of connecting those sensations and those feelings to something tangible so that we can make sense out of them. We can try to narrate them even into a storyline. And so they end up having some purpose in our lives. And so that's the general gist of meaning. But constructing meaning about our experiences is the most influential protective factor, one for resilience in general, but especially for coping with grief. And so being resilient in light of COVID-19, and learning to cope with both ambiguous losses and death losses, trying to construct meaning about our experiences, about what we're feeling, about what our subjective experience is one of the most influential protective factors. So we're going to do an activity in the second part of today's webinar that really taps into how do we do that? What does that really look like? But just know that that's what we're doing, is we're trying to give our internal experiences some kind of language, so that they have a purpose. And because we're relational beings, we don't construct meaning in isolation. We construct meaning collectively and relationally. And so, we don't really construct meaning on our own. Even attachment relationships tell us that meaning very much is constructed relationally. So we're going to talk about what that looks like too, and hopefully we'll get an experience of how to feel that way as well. But I chose this picture because I think there's a lot of meaning that can be drawn from this. And I'm curious, and just reflect for yourself. This is more rhetorical, so you don't have to answer this. But think about, like, what does this picture bring up for you? When it first came up on the page, what did you notice and what did you feel? as you continue to look at this picture, notice if you start to see anything different or if your feelings change. They don't need to, but just notice what changes for you. So when I first saw this picture, I think my initial reaction was sadness. And I think I noticed what drew my attention was the fact that this person, I can't tell what gender maybe this person is, but I noticed that this person was older. I noticed that there was a sense of longing maybe in the eyes, especially looking out towards the window. And I noticed that this person is wearing a mask. And so given all of those context clues, my brain started to try to make sense of that, tried to narrate what was going on in this picture. And so my brain narrated that as this person is likely separated from family during Christmas time and is longing for connection. However, as I continued to look at this picture, I also noticed I started to be curious about it, right? And my curiosity led me to some different perspectives about maybe it's not so much longing I'm noticing in this person's eyes, but maybe I'm noticing, I don't know, a sense of like wonder, which I often wonder at the first snow. And so I started to pay more attention to the snow that was outside. And I also noticed that there's a present next to this person. And so it's likely that someone did come to visit this person. And so there might not be a sense of longing. And as I started to notice more things about this picture, the meaning for it changed for me. And I started to realize that maybe this picture is, I started to experience more joy or more wonder when I noticed this picture instead of sadness. And so anyway, I hope that experience, even within yourself or just me narrating my own experience out loud, helped you realize that meaning is such a complicated thing. And it really evokes a sense of curiosity and a need for us to tap in to what's going on for us, but to also open our perspective to other sources of understanding or other interpretations of what something could mean. So I'm noticing some things in the chat, so I'm going to just pause to see if, yes, and this person is wearing a hat, so maybe there's like this playfulness, and there's a card and a gift, and so I think all of you were picking up on a lot of what I was picking up on as well. Okay, so how do we feel about doing breakout rooms? There's 17 of us, and so I don't know, we're going to go ahead and do it. I feel like that would be helpful just to break us into smaller groups, but maybe just 3 breakout rooms, Dakota, if that's okay. But I'm going to show you this next picture. And I also want you to, we'll spend maybe a minute or so looking at it. Do the exact same thing. Maybe notice first what you notice about it. What's your initial reaction, your internal feelings and sensations, and then just continue to look at it. See if anything changes, if you notice anything new, or if you don't, if you just continue to have your same internal feeling. So we'll spend a minute looking at the picture, and then Dakota, you can go ahead and break people up into breakout rooms. So maybe 5 to 6 people in each room. So this is the picture. Hopefully you had some good discussion in your groups. But I wanted to share a little bit about, from my group, we talked a lot about how, maybe can be initially quite sad for us, right? The need for disconnection, or it seems disconnecting, that they're trying to connect via the iPad. But then we started looking at it from different perspectives, even from different people in our own families. We started to think about how they've kind of tried to cope and deal with things. And it really changed how we viewed this picture, that there's really this attempt to connect, and there's smiling that's involved. And there's that for children, really connection can be quite different than how we might interpret connection. That connection for children, this really is connection for them. They see it that way. And so it had a lot of different meaning for us based on how we were looking at it and how we were seeing this picture. So I think the important part of that exercise was to just tap into how you initially respond to things and how our meanings do change if we really do sit with our feelings and our sensations for a minute and we allow ourselves to expand our perspective, that the meaning and our feelings about them do really change. And also, if we consider multiple different perspectives, even the context of our past experiences, we start to interpret it differently as well. So that is what meaning making is. But in order to really construct meaning about our own experience, we have to really be present in our experience. And sometimes we lose track of presence in the midst of stress, in the midst of trying to create new rituals or new traditions for ourselves, or in the midst of loss, we lose a sense of presence. And so I'm going to do an experiential exercise where we're really going to try to tap into presence and trying to find presence. So then hopefully we end up finding meaning as a result of that. So Dan Siegel, actually, those of you who know him, talks a lot about finding presence. And one of the acronyms, he uses a lot of acronyms, but one of the ones he uses is COAL. And that presence is really about the experience of curiosity, openness, acceptance, and love. And that the combination of these four things leads us to a sense of presence. And so in our experiential exercise, we're going to try to tap into each one of these things in ourselves. And hopefully, in the space of curiosity, openness, acceptance, and love, we can start to find meaning about even our experiences in the midst of COVID-19. So for curiosity, grief is accompanied by many often unanswerable questions, like why did this happen? When will this end? What does the future hold? A lot of these questions also that we can't control. And so curiosity can draw us to these questions, but then also, instead of being more curious about our external world, I want us to be more curious about our internal world. Again, in order to make meaning, we have to tap into what's happening subjectively, internally. And so let's be a little curious about our internal experience. So for yourself, again, on your own and quietly, for a few minutes, allow yourself to think about COVID. Just the word, maybe there's an image that comes up with that. But what emotions arise for you? Also notice any questions that you might have for yourself. And if you have a piece of paper handy, go ahead and write some of this down. And then, as you're thinking about these emotions or questions that come up for you, trying to understand them, what do those emotions or questions tell you about your experience of COVID? Again, quietly to yourself, and you're free to write the answer to this down as well. But what do those emotions or questions tell you about how you experience COVID-19? So now we're going to use that curiosity to bring us to a little bit of openness and consider for yourself, as you were thinking about the emotions and whatever arose for you, were you open to both the negative and positive emotions of your experience? Did you notice at any point that you were pushing certain thoughts or feelings away when they came up? And if you did, this time, as you reflect, allow yourself to be open to any other emotions, thoughts, or perspectives that decide to come up. Also, remember to breathe. If you're not breathing, keep breathing. And as you became more open, or whatever else came up for you, did any of that openness invite new understanding for you about your experience of COVID that was either different or the same than what you had experienced before? And go ahead and write any of those down, any new perspectives or understanding. And sometimes it's very common that our initial reaction to some of the more uncomfortable emotions might be to change them. But when we try to change them, what we end up doing is we lose our chance to explore their meaning. And so I want to remind you that it's okay to feel whatever you're feeling about COVID. You probably have many reasons to feel the way that you feel. So when you think about all of the emotions of your experience, remember that they have all contributed to who you are today and how you're showing up today. And those emotions probably have taught you something about living in a pandemic, good or bad. They've helped to teach you something. And so we can accept them for whatever they're trying to teach you. If they are trying to teach you something, maybe ask them, what are you trying to teach me? And if I did learn anything from you, what did I learn? And go ahead and write that down as well. And finally, in this state of presence that we've tapped into our experience, our sensations, and some meaning, we're going to offer ourselves some love and understanding. So in being connected to those feelings and how you're feeling about COVID and the lessons maybe that they've tried to teach you, what do you think you need from you today? It might be rest or connection, maybe creativity. But what do you need from you today? And then try as best you can to offer yourself something sincerely out of love. It might be a word of encouragement, praise, or hope. Maybe praise that you've made it through this difficult experience. Maybe encouragement that it will get better, or that you've gone through more difficult things. Or hope that there was some light in a lot of this, and there's actually more positive than you realized. Okay. Spend a few moments, maybe stay in the presence if you can, but also you can start to kind of come back to the larger group in this webinar. But in doing that exercise, did any of you find any purpose that COVID had in your life, or any meaning that you found? You're welcome to share now. I know I've not let you share so far, but you can share now.
I think it's created a fair amount of purpose in a lot of our lives. It's made us refocus and redirect. As a clinician, it's made us sharpen our skills. But I think there's another higher level for me in my personal life and my family's life and those loved ones around me, is that it's made us realize the importance of connecting with people and touch and those things that are more common in Western society, you know?
Yes. Yeah, it's made us miss the things that we might have taken for granted, and yet we don't take them for granted as much anymore. Or at least I don't. I connect with that a lot. Thank you, Dennis.
We have someone in the chat commented that it's been an opportunity and a centering back to priorities and true values regarding what provides meaning and purpose for them.
Yeah, which often grief does. It helps us reprioritize our life. It's funny, the paradox of grief, I often say, is that it makes us think about life, and it brings up the meaning of life. And so I think grief and COVID-19 has done similarly. It's made us reprioritize and question what our values and our true purpose is. Let's see, I saw something else in the chat too. Yeah, that it's okay to feel hopeful, or sorry, it's okay to feel disappointed, and we can still find hope even when we're disappointed. How is this activity for you in general? Just finding presence. For those of you who are clinicians, how do you see it working with your clients? Or not working, right? Sometimes maybe it's not appropriate for certain clients, but
I really liked that piece about openness, especially. I feel like oftentimes we're so closed, or we do try to push those feelings away. And even in the activity, I found myself like trying to push away the positive things, which I thought was really interesting. And so I think it's just a reminder that there is both positive and negative in every experience, and that we need to be open to all of it.
yeah. Thank you, Dakota. Thank you.
For me, Jessica, I think it just comes in. The workshop is good for me, and also for my clients. Like next week, I have somebody scheduled who lost her husband to COVID, and this just and the son called on her behalf, and so you know, he's saying like she has a lot of questions, and like doing this exercise, I'm like, oh my God, this is so helpful. It's just it's very, you know, to be very accepting, and maybe to help her to get to that place, to welcome the questions. I think it's just very soothing. It was very soothing for me, and I think it's helpful for me to be able to help her.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think sometimes, like I said, in grief, we often are pulled to the things that we can't control as we're trying to make sense of it. We're pulled to the external when really what we want to try to make sense of is our internal experience. And so when we reframe our questions, instead of asking about all these things that are somewhat unanswerable, like why did this happen, and is it going to happen again, and you know, what does this mean for me? It's more about like, well, what does this mean for me? How am I feeling about this? Can I answer some questions that are really I'm wrestling with in my internal experience? So thank you, Ophelia. All right. Well, I just was this. There's some things about me. So for me, I think COVID helped me feel more confident as an instructor. I had to teach hybrid, and it was scary and it was intimidating, and but I did it, and so it was awesome. It helped me again, like Dennis said, appreciate the little things, like not having to remember to wear a mask. It allowed me to see so much convenience that I had in my life before COVID, and because I don't have that as much anymore, I was encouraged to take advantage of other conveniences like DoorDash. I use that on the reg now. And then it made time with my family less stressful because we weren't so concerned about what are we going to do with each other, or if we needed to talk about things. We just enjoyed connecting. All right, so some final thoughts before we go into questions or Q&A. That constructing meaning isn't about removing the heaviness, right? We're not trying to get rid of it. We're not trying to change it even. We're just trying to make sense of it. And so because we're trying to make sense of it, it helps give it a purpose, and it helps us open our perspective to maybe what that purpose could be. And then collective meaning, I can't harp on this enough because this is like my soapbox, is that collective meaning has a greater impact on our resilience. So talk to your coworkers, your family, and your friends about what they're dealing with and how they're coping, and what the purpose of COVID has meant for them, because that does add to the context of our experience and our meaning, so then we can better interpret situations as they arise. For especially with grief, make sure that you take it one day at a time. Again, to focus on what is within your control versus what's outside your control. Find time to be present in your daily life, whatever that looks like, even if it's 5 minutes. Try as best you can to be present. And then take breaks from the stress or grief. Sometimes we believe that grief has to, because like if we were to separate from our grief, somehow that means that we didn't love that person, or we didn't care anymore, or I don't know, we just don't allow ourselves to feel happy for some reason. And so grief is about the balance of both negative and positive experiences. And so take breaks from the stress of the grief. You're welcome to put it away for a little bit. Doesn't mean it's going to go away. It just means you're allowed to take some breaks from it. And then you can choose when you're ready to pick it back up again. So it also makes you feel more in control, because grief is just such a complicated, complex process. It often makes us feel very out of control. So giving ourselves a chance to be the ones who choose to pick our grief up again instead of letting it run our lives can be really helpful too. Okay, well, that is the end. And I'm open to Q&A. Do we have questions? Are we good? Because we can also end here for tonight. That's okay.
Maybe I just wanted to express my appreciation, Jessica and Dakota, for putting this together. This is it's a delicate thing we're dealing with now. And I've been in the industry for 32 years, and at no point have I ever dealt with these things with my family, with my colleagues, with my clients. So I think it's what we try to do an awful lot is normalize and validate why people are seeing this. But if you take a look at this, we're having almost a 30% increase in mental health and psych issues with our functional patients. So it's just part of what we're dealing with. And I think we appreciate that Utah State University is willing and capable of sharing resources with us out here, because we're all looking for solutions. And I think what you've done, Jessica, is you've allowed us as clinicians or colleagues, in a sense, to share with one another, which we don't always get those opportunities because we're usually saving all the other souls, right?
That's right. Sometimes we forget that our presence matters too. And figuring out what it means for us helps us then make sense of what our clients are feeling. So thank you, Dennis. I appreciate your gratitude, but I think we definitely need a collective experience of fellow colleagues as well to feel resilient, right? That we are also all going through this, of the stress of having to support many more clients, and yeah, trying to strain ourselves even a little bit because we know the need. So thank you all for being amazing and supporting all your clients. And they're so lucky to have you. All right. Well, feel free. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's questions, but you're also welcome to email me with questions. If you need other resources, I'm happy to share those as well. So I'll put my email in the chat. You're welcome to email me. Also, if you have clients that are in Utah, we are offering grief support groups. And so feel free to send them on over to us and we can set them up with a support group.